Good morning. Welcome back to Disabled Farm School. I'm Rachel. That's Juniper staring at me like I've betrayed her soul because I've come indoors. The most dejected dog ever, like we didn't just have a morning trail walk where she ran and ran and ran through the sun. Hi. It's a beautiful, brisk morning here at the treehouse tiny farm. I just finished some farm chores and I'm about to start on some winter kitchen homesteading projects. I'm thinking today about pacing, which is something that athletes and chronically ill people both have to think about a lot. Actually, I've generally found, for me, treating my disabilities, like how I need to take care of myself and basically do like sort of training and recovery to maintain my baseline, the more I treat myself as an athlete with very different responses to exercise than what you would assume for an athlete, but still someone who is in training to do a sport. The sport is just accessing my life. A, the more fun it is, and B, the better it works. Like really thinking in those same principles of like, what is my edge that will allow me to improve without going too far and injuring myself, which is different than it would be if I didn't have specifically exertion-based, delayed backlashes as one of my symptom categories. But once I reframed my idea of like, if you keep doing the hard thing, it will get easier, to you have to find the window between too hard, which feels good in the moment and then makes you feel incredibly sick and backslide later, and too easy and then you don't progress and you backslide. And it's a very narrow moving target for a lot of us. And some people can't exercise. That's when you access exercise. Some people can't access exercise safely at all, and pushing them to exercise is very dangerous for them and for their survival as disabled people. So I just want to say, not everybody needs to exercise. I'm just talking about my own experience as someone with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, endometriosis, and a bunch of conditions that sort of are in a constellation around those two main things that affect my life. All this to say, pacing is not just about physical activity, it's about pacing exertion, endurance, rest in life, and mental exertion and cognitive exertion are part of that. I'm in a moment this morning where I have a ton of mental energy, and I've done a lot of physical activity over the last couple of days, and I know that if I do more intensive physical activity this week, I will go past my threshold and I can end up then injuring myself or causing myself to crash and therefore losing access to exercise again because I am flu-like. I know I need to pace myself, but I also feel really energetic and engaged in terms of my like thoughts and my personality. Shout out to my high energy personality, low energy body / chronic illness, or just, sleep deprived parents, people working 3 jobs. It's like a lot of the parameters that show up for people having to get creative with limitations in order to do acts of like joyful living, like gardening and cooking and things that are really essential. Accessing them, the parameters, even though we all have completely different access needs and bodies and weird circumstances that are affecting us, a lot of it comes down to accessibility in space, accessibility in time, energy, physical capacity, and like ergonomics, and budget, and your housing situation or lack thereof. The ways that like we each figure out those things are super different and super ongoing, which is the whole point of this channel. There's no prescription for accessibility. There's some things in life that are like great universal design. I think with gardening, it's so individual. But I think it's cool to think about those categories. For me today, this week, I'm gonna do a few fermentation projects in the kitchen and then one taking care of tools, which is something I am trying to be better about this year project. We're gonna make what's called a ginger bug, which is a fermentation starter made out of ginger and sugar that will eventually allow me to brew ginger beer. I love ginger beer. I can't really eat raw or cooked ginger that hasn't been fermented anymore, but I can do bubbly ginger beer. I'm going to feed my sourdough starter so I can make bread later in the week. I'm gonna oil my wooden spoons and boards. And then I have been leaching the olives that I harvested with cold water rinses every day, and it's time to put them in brine. I've never done that before, and so I'm excited to learn. That's a hack for me when my brain has a lot of energy and I need to slow my body down, is to try a new thing, because that's incredibly mentally stimulating. Often I don't have brain energy either, so this is an interesting combo where I really need to engage my brain while keeping my body at a slower pace. I will rest, like fully lay down every day. I always have to in order to not crash, but I don't need to do that yet. Come on along with me and let's hang out with some winter ferments and kitchen projects. So as always, I am using Wild Fermentation by Sandor Katz for my wild fermentation experiments. Ginger beer. Chop some of the ginger or grate it. 2 teaspoons of sugar to a cup of water. Stir it and leave it in a warm spot, covered with cheesecloth to allow free circulation of air while keeping flies out. And then add ginger and sugar every day or 2 until it starts bubbling, which should take 2 days to a week. Okay, and then it goes on to tell you how to make the ginger beer once you have the bubbling starter. So basically it's like yeasts, microbes that are active in the air, the same way that you would do a sourdough starter. And they will come and hang out, consume the sugar and the ginger, and start to populate your little starter. So that's what I'm gonna do. So equal parts ginger and sugar to a cup of water. I can do that. Yeah. Skin and all. He says skin and all. Sometimes ginger skin makes things bitter. I think I'll use some of the skin, but not all of it. I've said this before about fermentation, but I think it's one of the coolest gardening collaborations you can do if you have limited energy, if you have varying access needs, because you can sort of change the physical location in which you're doing it. You can use various tools, like if you can't chop or grate, you can use a food processor, and they do make some food processors with like easier push buttons than others, because sometimes those buttons are hard to hold, or switches that you can flip so you don't have to hold it down. You could also literally smash the ginger, like if you just had a little mallet and that was easier ergonomically for you, and if the knives aren't safe for your particular fine motor skills. That's one of the reasons I do this stuff in the morning, knives and me in the evenings. I try not to use sharp tools in the evenings because I develop a little bit of a tremor by the end of the day. It's a cool thing to me because when I have energy, I can do the startup of this. That's the next few days, hopefully. There are some ferments where you don't even have to feed them over the next few days. You just make the brine and leave them. And that's awesome if you're like, oh, I've got unexpected energy. I want to do a project. I want to collaborate with, I'm literally growing something, right? You are growing a microbial ecosystem. It's not a plant, but if you think of gardening as collaborating with other organisms to produce food for yourself or for the ecosystem, then that's gardening. And then the microbes sort of take over for you. I think that's so fun. I think it's so cool. It's particularly cool because they're invisible. And it's like, I don't know, it has this like bubble, toil and trouble, except no trouble, no toil, hopefully. And then for a lot of us, the end product is really helpful for all kinds of stuff that we deal with and delicious. To me, it's like such a joyful win. And so you'll hear me talk about it kind of a lot. I know there's a lot of people who will tell you that eating fermented foods or taking probiotics will like cure everything about you. First of all, you don't need everything about you fixed. Like only things you want to try to change. You're wonderful. Second of all, no, it won't. Otherwise we would all be fine. We just eat some yogurt and be fine. But it can help. Also, a lot of people who can't eat certain foods can eat them if they're fermented. So if you're lactose intolerant, you might be able to have yogurt, things like that. So anyway, okay, I'll get off my soapbox that's actually a fermentation jar and just get back to work here. So next up, I'm gonna feed the sourdough starter. I don't do this the way a lot of people do, where they're really, really precise about it. I keep my sourdough starter in the fridge, and a day or two before I want to make bread dough, I bring it out, put it on the counter, and feed it a little flour and water every day and make sure it's really bubbly. Then I make bread dough and I put the leftover starter back in the fridge. I feed it again, put it back in the fridge. There's all these recipes that talk about discard and having to keep it on the counter and feed it every day and all these things. As long as it ends up getting fed about once a week, it seems to survive in the fridge for years, at least for me. I have only lost sourdough starters when I've moved or left town for multiple weeks. Even then, sometimes they lasted in the fridge. If sourdough seems intimidating to you, I've been there. I've made sourdough and then not made sourdough many times in life. It's really fun. It's not as, like, you'll see recipes that are like, you gotta weigh out every ingredient perfectly. You don't. You can just use that recipe if you want to get the results of that recipe. But bread is effectively flour and water, some kind of yeast, and usually some salt. That's it. You can experiment with combinations of those and see what you get if you like experimenting, or you can follow a recipe if you like recipes. It's not like a high risk. There's no, you haven't put any high risk products in there. It's just fun. You do have to cook it for it to become bread. I think that's sort of a condition. Let's feed the sourdough bubbles. Ooh, it smells nice and sour. Do they make like a sourdough proof DSLR camera? Because I've definitely got sourdough starter embedded in the... Okay, so this is already bubbling. Sometimes that's just from incorporating air. I've used the starter recently, so it's very active. I'm gonna put it on the counter, cover it up, and probably tomorrow or the next day make some bread dough. I'm gonna try to do these olives, which is the thing I've never done before, so we'll see. These are the olives. I'm gonna rinse them one more time and then make a brine for them that is made out of salt, water, and red wine vinegar. I don't know, I'm really excited. It's funny, I've been doing this kind of stuff for my whole career. I really love all the different parts of growing plants and DIY and food. Basically what we would call homesteading, except I'm not attached to the individualism that we often talk about with homesteading. I think community is a huge, important part of it. And also the history of homesteading on this land has a lot to do with stealing and colonizing land, and I am very much against that. I will use that word homesteading, but I want to be very clear that it is in a justice-oriented context and community and inclusivity-oriented context. It's just helpful to have an umbrella term that talks about land-based living. I also say land-based living. The indoor parts are implied with the word farming, but market farming doesn't always involve the indoor part. Anyway, this is a long way of saying I love the indoor parts of farming. I love learning new things. No matter how many years I've done this, it's always fun to learn a new thing. And I always get a little nervous. So if you get nervous too, don't worry. Especially with salt-based fermentation, which is what this is going to be, salt and vinegar. Those are incredible preservatives. Let's do it. Where are you? There it is. Kalamata style home canned olives. Prepare the brine. Pound of salt per gallon. Okay, I gotta do some math here. A quart of red wine vinegar. I don't have that many olives. BRB with some math. Okay, so one of these mason jars is a quart, so a quarter of a gallon. So I'm gonna do everything by a quarter. A cool thing, I just reread the recipe while I'm stirring, I'll tell you, is the way they seal this ferment in this recipe is to put a ½ an inch of olive oil on the very top. Classic Greek, we just put olive oil on everything. You might have seen this in some pesto recipes for keeping pesto fresh in the fridge, is to have a ½ inch of olive oil covering the pesto, and then it won't oxidize and turn that darker green. It'll stay really bright and fresh. So this is a similar idea. And then you leave it to sit in a cool, dark place for a month, to cure for a month before starting to eat it. There they are in the oil. Oh good, now I have sourdough and olive oil on the camera. Anytime you have olive oil on your hands while you're cooking, don't wash it off, rub it into your hands, and then use soap only on the palms of your hands so you can grip stuff again. Moisturizes the back of your hands. Don't waste things that are wonderful. No pressure, but pressure. It's like nice massage pressure with the olive oil. on the back of your hand. It's nice. Lid. Gorgeous. Label. There we go. Today's beautiful abundance. We got olives, we got sourdough starter, we got a bouquet of calendula, and we got a ginger bug. So it's like past time for me to do my physical therapy. And if I don't do it before I eat lunch, it doesn't happen. It's pretty fun at this point because it's like full on strength training because I've been doing it for so long that it got out of the like, oh, I'm lying on the floor moving occasionally to I can do some strength training stuff that I really enjoy. I'm so tempted to skip it so I can continue on with this video, but I'm gonna go do it. I'm gonna come back to doing the spoons and the cutting boards. I hope you have a great rest of your day and I'll see you tomorrow. Good morning. It's the next day, although it feels like it's been 25 years. Very tired. The fire alarm that is somehow both wired into an unreachable point inside a gable in the roof, but also runs out of battery and goes off on its own at weird times. Went off at 5:45 this morning. So I don't really want to do anything. Oh man. This is the kind of day where relearning how to work and farm and garden and also still rest and pace with disabilities and chronic illnesses is just really confusing because I might only be exhausted because of sleep deprivation, but if I push through that, I could cause a crash because of my actual symptoms. I've got to pare my day back down, even though I don't want to. Like, I'd much rather just get a bunch of stuff done and then go to sleep tonight, but that's no longer an accessible plan. So I think what I'm gonna do is I am gonna oil the boards and the spoons because that needs to be done, but I'm not gonna make bread dough. I'm going to make sourdough pancakes, which is a much quicker use of the sourdough, and then put the starter back in the fridge. Eat what I make for lunch. Something else, something, sleepy, brain, exhausted, something. Oh, I just wanna go to bed. All the lights are too bright. She's a pup. She heard me say that. So funny story, I overfilled the starter, as you might have been able to guess, if you saw how close to the top. Fermented things bubble over. It was kind of like the blob onto the counter, traveling. It got very excited. That's why all of my fermentation projects always have a tray under them, but even the tray could not keep up with the enthusiasm of the starter. Look at those bubbles! Oh yeah. Okay, so all of these boards and spoons I washed thoroughly, and then I sprayed down with a mixture of white vinegar and water, and then let that soak in, and then wiped them off and let them dry. Idea is to discourage any mold or mildew or bacteria living in the boards with that white vinegar water mixture, and then treat the wood, season the wood, and preserve the boards, make them less friendly to water and to bacteria with the oil. These boards are thirsty. They have not had this done in far too long. I've got some mineral oil here, food grade. I don't use cloths for this, I use my hands. And the reason I do that is the oil gets absorbed into the cloths and I don't like to waste it. But I do the things on top of the board and then whatever's spills over goes into the butcher block itself. That's nice. I think everything is now nicely oiled, including me, the camera, and the wooden boards and spoons. Half of the things that are oiled were meant to be oiled, and the other half is just sort of a bonus. I'm gonna go do my physical therapy, let this soak in, and then we'll make some sourdough pancakes for lunch and call it a day. Okay, update post-physical therapy. Definitely have to go back to bed. I don't know if I'm having an actual symptom flare or it's just that I, for some reason, don't enjoy waking up at 5:45 in the morning. Or both, because sometimes you can't tell. with chronic illness. They're happening at the same time. Fatigue, nauseous, headache. I did do my physical therapy, which made me feel a little bit better. I do want to finish the bare minimum stuff with the fermentation. I gotta feed the ginger bug today. Then I'm gonna make some sourdough pancakes for lunch and go to bed. If you experience energy limiting conditions or energy affecting conditions, but then also just like regular life, which affects your fatigue levels, but also affects just like tiredness, which is different than fatigue. How do you make decisions about when you're going to keep going and when you're going to rest? For a long time, I always erred on the side of push through, and that was really bad for me. And then for a while, I got freaked out by how much damage that had done to me physically and how far I had fallen in terms of what activities I could access. I went radically in the other direction and like built this life around just having to rest as soon as I didn't feel good, and often before I didn't feel good. I had to do that. And working has been somewhat inaccessible for the last few years. Part of doing this is the beauty of it is to be able to adjust as needed. And yet I still feel confused about how to be someone who's doing things again, but still rests when I need to rest. It's like I have two brains, the rest completely or the do everything all the time. And I'm having to get them to like live together for making those decisions. I have all sorts of tricks that I use. Let me know yours in the comments, and let me know if you want to hear a video about like those kinds of tricks and tips, none of which I can think of right now because my brain fog is so bad. And honestly, I can see in the viewfinder that my eyes are like mostly closed. I hope you are resting if you need to rest, even if you don't think you need to rest. Preemptive rest is a skill. It is a medically effective thing to do. Let's go to the kitchen and finish up these projects and go to bed. Of a dog who wants to be outside in the sun but is mad that I'm not there with her, so is just standing in the doorway. Somewhat like a cat. What are you doing? You look so dejected. You have such a good life. I promise. We have a really good life, all things considered, Junie. We're very lucky. Oh, the pain. Oh, sweetie. You just want affection? You just want loving? Some sourdough pancake batter. I'm using the Tassajara bread book recipe. I really love recipes like this because they can use the sourdough within like 30 minutes of starting the recipe. So I prepped the sourdough for bread, which would have taken intermittent work all day, and then it needs to rise in the fridge overnight and then bake tomorrow. And I just am losing brain power so fast, not tolerating being upright. I can still use that input, that energy that I put in and that the sourdough put in, frankly, and get something to eat out of it that I get to enjoy that is made of the sourdough. But it's a quicker food. And there's other things like that. I've made sourdough popovers before. They're delicious. That's my spoony chronic illness / disability hack when you've prepped for a complicated sourdough situation and you don't want to waste your prep. Smells incredible. They're so tender. Okay, y'all, I'm gonna finish my pancakes, go lay down. I hope that you are able to take care of yourself at least a little bit the way that you need to today. I am sending you pancakes and rest. Thank you all for being here. Subscribe if you want to. It's free. I will see you next time here at Disabled Farm School, where gardening is for everybody. And we are just trying to figure out how together. And today the how is go back to bed. So if you need to hear that, it's okay. Go back to bed.